Good morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told out of Voice of Radio. So today, we need to take a little bit of a look at the best tag team Pokemon ever. You see, ladies and gentlemen, we've gotten to that stage now, and I know I've said this for like VMAXs, but I think we can say with some degree of certainty with tag teams, they are done. They came around in Team Up. They lasted until Cosmic Eclipse. They were the thing in Year 3 of the Sword and Shield block. But now, ladies and gentlemen, Year 3 is over, the block is over, and that means that we can take a look at the best tag team Pokemon ever. But there is a gigantic caveat. The expanded format is still going, and these are all still legal and expanded, so this list could actually still change. Please do bear that in mind. I'm not expecting huge changes, but I can't guarantee that it won't. So a couple of ones that were very close to making the list, but unfortunately did not quite make it. First of all, Espeon and Deoxys. This one was a really cool card. You know, the real good thing about it was Cross Division GX. Free energy, place 10 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon in any way you like. But if you could get 6 energy on there, you could drop 20 damage counters. And we saw this played in a bunch of other decks by itself with stuff like Mewtwo and Mew. More on that one later. And honestly, this was just a really good card. And if you weren't ready, you would get absolutely wrecked by this. Because if you were playing an evolution deck, they could just take out all of your pre-evolutions in one go. And it was all over. The other one that I really wanted to put on this list but could not bring myself to do it was Gardevoir and Sylveon. And this was a very weird card, because there were times where this was one of the very best cards in the game. And this is not a right now list, because they've all rotated out. This is a throughout the history of them list, and I want to put this one on the list, but I don't think on balance it can displace any of the 10 that I did leave in the top 10. Although, let's be clear, it's very, very close. Fairy Song let you search for up to 2 Fairy Energy and attach them to your bench Pokemon in any way you like. Kaleidostorm, great name, did 150 and let you move any energy from your Pokemon to your other Pokemon in any way you like, which was great because it meant if you were about to get KO'd, you could just move it and heal. It was brilliant. And then Magical Miracle, 200 damage. This was your once per game GX attack. To be clear, for those of you that may have forgotten or didn't know, your GX attack, it was once per game, and that was in total. You couldn't use them on different Pokemon, 1 GX attack per game. 200 damage, but if it had 3 extra energy on, your opponent shuffles their hand into their deck. Bearing in mind this accelerated energy to itself anyway, and there were other ways. Basically, what you would do here is make your opponent get rid of their entire hand, then play a little bit of disruption, and your opponent would lose. It was, for a time, a great deck, but not for all the time, and it really has dropped off. It's not played and expanded anymore, so it got close, put it that way. But in at number 10, we've got Megalopony and Jigglypuff. And firstly, Jigglypuff. But secondly, this is just a really, really good card. This one was a tech. There was no Megalopony and Jigglypuff decks or any of that rubbish. No! What we had here was just a card that existed to help out other decks. Firstly, it was all colourless energy, which was a big deal. But also, for free energy, you did 60 damage, plus 60 more for each of your opponent's Pokemon GX and Pokemon EX in play. So this did one of 2 things against a lot of decks. Obviously, some didn't play them and were fine. This would either force your opponent to not bench their GXs or EXs, which is kind of a win for you, or it would do a huge amount of damage because your opponent did bench their EXs and GXs. This was played in a lot of decks. Because it was colourless energy, it really could be played in anything. And because it punished your opponent for playing lots of EXs and GXs, this was played in so many decks just as a, look, don't play them. And if you do play them, get ready because I will punish you for playing them. This was a great tech. In at number 9, we've got Rowlet and the ALOLAN EXEGGUTOR. which is one that was never a huge powerhouse. This was never some kind of game-breaking card taking the format by storm, but it saw consistent play, and it's still seeing a bunch of play over in Expanded. And sure, free energy 150 heal 30 is fine, and sure, free energy 200, but if you got 6 energy, your opponent shuffles all energy from all of their Pokemon into their deck. This is all cool, but really it was super growth. Also, check out how high the text goes on this card, completely ruining the wonderful artwork. Basically, for 0 energy, search your deck for a card that evolves from one of your grass Pokemon. If you turned it into a stage 1, you could search for a stage 2. And there are other uses for this, but let's be clear, Vileplume. This was for Vileplume, and it still is an Expanded, because Vileplume exists to stop your opponent playing item cards. So what you do is you get this out, and then for 0 energy, you item lock your opponent for the rest of the game. Yeah, still nuts and Expanded. Cool card. Saw a bunch of play all over, don't get me wrong. But right now, in Expanded, this is a legit deck, because it gets you that turn 1 Vileplume really consistently going second, and that really is about all you need. It was always more for this attack than anything else, but you know what? That's good enough. In at number 8, we've got Garchomp and Giratina, and I'm warning you right now, this is another one that might end up being a little bit too low. There was a point where this broke the game. There was an Expanded type tournament over in Japan where basically if you weren't playing this, you had no chance of winning, and if you were playing this, the game basically turned into a coin flip, and a bunch of cards ended up getting banned. And what's so good about this is Calamitous Slash, 160 damage, but if your opponent's active Pokemon already has any damage counters on, this attack does 80 more damage. And the reason this was so gosh darned good was because you had the combination of Karate Belt and Double Dragon Energy. And it really was as simple as that. Because you see, if you were behind on prizes, and it was I've done a whole video about it, I'll try and remember to link it in the description. But basically, you could get yourself down to like 1 prize remaining. You could easily go behind on prizes. You would completely wreck your opponent's hand to get rid of all of their cards. You'd be behind on prizes, so you could then use Karate Belt to bring your attack cost down by 1 fighting energy, so it was just a Psychic and a Colorless. At which point, you could pay it with a Double Dragon Energy, and you just had a really consistent attacker for a single energy. Essentially a single energy. And it was that simple. It was a whole thing where, as I said, I've done a whole video explaining how this deck was so gosh darn broken. But, long story short, this was just a really efficient attacker that in these hand disruption decks was absolutely, utterly broken. Incidentally, it was a good card outside of that. It's still a nice card. You know, GG the End discarded 1 of your opponent's Pokemon and all cards attached to it. But with 3 extra fighting energy, you discarded 2 of them. Single energy, 40 damage to 1 of your opponent's Pokemon. This saw play outside of that. But it was the finisher in a hand disruption deck that made it amazing. In at number 7, we've got Lucario and Melmetal. Now, Lucario and Melmetal was basically the tank. Because what you've got for 2 energy, 50 damage, search for metal energy and attach it, fine. 4 energy, 150, fine. But what was really good was Full Metal Wall. For a single energy, all of your metal Pokemon take 30 less damage from your opponent's attacks for the rest of the game. And if you've got a second energy on there, you also discard all energy from your opponent's active. So if you timed it right, you basically nerfed their best Pokemon while giving yourself protection for the rest of the game. And this will be played in metal decks with a whole bunch of other ways to reduce damage. It comboed beautifully with Zamazenta, because Zamazenta was already immune to VMAXs, which is a big deal. And then it's taking 30 less damage from attacks. And you basically ended up with just ridiculous tanks that couldn't be taken down. And sure, if you had Pokemon that could hit through whatever barriers you had, and Fire X, etc., would absolutely wreck you. But outside of that, this was an infuriating deck, and it was all Lucario and Melmetal really that started this off. In at number 6, we've got Greninja and Zoroark. And I really did not think this was going to be so high. And when making this list, I really agonized as to whether I could put it this high. And honestly, I can. And the reason very simply is, although it was very much a here and there deck while it was legal, and it never really broke the format, there was an expanded tournament at the IT Champions League just a couple of weeks ago. Second place, this. Because you see, it's actually crazy good. For 2 energy, you do 30 damage base plus 30 more for each darkness energy attached to all of your Pokemon. And then you've got the GX attack here that puts 2 in any combination of darkness type Pokemon GX and EX from your discard pile onto your bench. But if you've got an extra energy, you then get to attach 2 energy from your discard pile to each of them. It's really good. And essentially, you just try and pile energy onto the field. Darkrai GX's ability helped very much with that. Dark Patch helps very much with that. Galarian Moltres V helps very much with that. And then you end up just doing absolutely huge damage. And I'm afraid it really is that simple. It's just an absolute powerhouse. Maybe there are other cards coming in the future, Darkrai V-Star. There is a chance that Darkrai V-Star is going to make this irrelevant in Expanded, and maybe it will. It's got the same attack. But you have to evolve, but it only gives up 2 prizes. We'll wait and see exactly what happens. But the fact of the matter is, what we've got here is just an absolute powerhouse, which is still doing amazingly in Expanded, and I honestly think we've got to respect that and give it a little bit of love. In at number 5, we've got Trevenant and Dusknoir, and if you're looking for the most annoying card on this list, you might have found it, ladies and gentlemen. You might have found it. Because you see, although Garchomp and Giratina was used as a finisher, this was a hand disruption in and of itself. And incidentally, this did also go and get cards banned for being too gosh darned good. So what we've got here is an attack for 3 energy, 150 damage. Choose 2 random cards from your opponent's hand. Your opponent reveals those cards and shuffles them into their deck. So you would use one of those cards that put your opponent down to a low hand, something like an Ace Trainer as an example. If you're behind on prizes, you can use Ace Trainer, and that would put your opponent down to a 3-card hand, and then of course this would then put them down to a 1-card hand, and things get very interesting. How would you go down to, be behind on prizes so quickly? Well, you would go ahead and use my low-tech. This was one of those, had energy grace, you knocked it out, you're behind on prizes, activate Ace Trainer, and then you attach 3 basic energy from your discard pile to a non-EX Pokemon. Well, this is a non-EX Pokemon, ladies and gentlemen. This is a GX Pokemon. And that was not excluded. It's why nowadays we see wordings like Rulebox, because this clearly should have been excluded. Got my Lotic banned, unfortunately, which is a little bit sad. But I think it's fair to say, in the end, absolutely necessary. Yeah, this one was not fun to play against. In at number 4, we've got Reshiram and Charizard, and this one was far more straightforward. Reshiram and Charizard smashed. That's what it did. You had Outrage that did 30 damage base plus 10 more for each damage counter on this Pokemon. You had, so basically if your opponent didn't one-hit KO you, you could do a huge amount of damage. We had Flare Strike, which is just a flat 230, which was kind of a little bit silly. And then Double Blaze did 200 damage, but with an extra 3 energy, 6 total, you did 300 damage, and went through any effects on the defending Pokemon. To be perfectly blunt with you, ladies and gentlemen, this was great. And this was one of the key cards in the format for a while. Sure, it wouldn't have been good enough without Welder, which allowed you to attach extra energy while drawing cards, but you know what? We had Welder. And it wasn't much more complicated than attach energy, use Welder, smash. But you know what? For an awful lot of the format, that was good enough, ladies and gentlemen. That was good enough. In at number 3, we've got Pikachu and ZEROM, and believe me, this top 3 is tight. There is, I think, a pretty big difference between the top 3 and the rest of them, but these top 3 are very tight together. There is a clear and obvious top 3. You can argue, if you so wish, that, we should put Gardevoir and Sylveon on the list. Fine. I really don't think you can argue with the top 3. You can argue with the order, but not the cards. Pikachu and ZEROM is one of those that people kept announcing its death knell. Every time a new set came out, people went, yeah, can't play Pikachu and ZEROM anymore. Pikachu and ZEROM's done. But it's not done, ladies and gentlemen. It kept going. Pikachu and ZEROM just never got bad. It just kept being good over and over and over again. It really was a little bit ridiculous. What we basically had here was for free energy, full blitz, 150, search your deck for free lightning and attach them to one of your Pokemon. Good damage and energy acceleration. And then tag bolt, if you had 6 energy on, would do 200 to the active and 170 to the bench. And you would usually be taking at least 4 prizes when you use this attack. It was absolutely ridiculous. If your opponent had a bad start to the game, you could just full blitz onto yourself, tag bolt turn 2, and by that point, it was basically over. And I do mean turn 2, because we had the combination for quite a while of Tapu Koko and Thunder Mountain, which allowed you to get that turn 1 attack. Not everybody played for the turn 1 attack, because it could get kind of awkward, but you could. And if you had that kind of game, ladies and gentlemen, well, let's just say the games tended to not last very long. I think that's fair to say. Put it all together and you had a ridiculous card, and it really was just one of the best cards around for just so long. Because it was fast, it was consistent, it could take multiple KOs. I loved it because I kept playing fighting decks and I would wreck them. But yeah, this was good. Coming in at number 2, we had Mewtwo and Mew, and this is an awkward one, because Mewtwo and Mew was very, very good for a long time. Henry Brand used it to win the World Championship. It was great, but it wasn't really great on its own. It's a weird card to talk about. The only attack it actually had, free energy, 200, and with an extra energy healed all damage from all of your Pokemon. That was super annoying if you played single prize decks, as I tended to. But really, it was the ability Perfection, which allowed it to copy anything, basically. Absolutely anything. We ended up with super weird things, like Charizard GX, which was not actually a good card. And it was not meant to be a good card, incidentally. It was literally designed to, it was in the family deck, and it was designed to be a nice, simple card to help people get learning, but it did 300 damage for 4 energy. So you would attach an energy turn 1, and then turn 2, you would welder and attach and do 300 damage. Absolutely ridiculous, ladies and gentlemen. Absolutely ridiculous. And it's not even worth sitting here trying to go through all the different uses. It was played in Psychic decks with stuff like Espeon and Deoxys, Fire decks with stuff like RESUIRAM and Charizard. There were too many uses for it, and that's why it comes in at number 2. But in at number 1, it's ADP, or as I like to call it, the card that ruined the game. I didn't like ADP. The thing I really disliked about ADP, Arceus and Dialga and Palkia, is the fact that against single prize decks, which again is pretty much all I tended to play, this just made so many of them not viable. Because you see, it had an absolutely, genuinely, literally broken attack that for 2 energy, which was not difficult to get going, and honestly a lot of the time you could do it turn 1, going second, which said that for the rest of the game, all your attacks did an extra 30 damage. And for the rest of the game, every time you took a KO, you took an extra prize. And single prize decks, the whole point is you've got lower HP and you're more easily KO'd. But that's okay, because you're trading prizes quite nicely. But when your opponent's taking 2 prizes per KO, you just lose. I did not like this. Plus, for free energy, you did 150, 180 after the GX attack. and you accelerated free energy, so as soon as you started attacking, if you could get KOs with this, you started attacking, you basically just never stopped attacking. It really was just an oppressive card. There were so many games with this deck where basically by turn 2 you'd know you'd lost, or won if you were playing the deck. It was literally a case of, oh, it's turn 2, yeah, I've gotten my GX attack off and used my damaging attack to accelerate energy, I've won the game. And then you're just kind of going through the motions. I was not a fan of this card, and I don't think it was healthy for the game, and I am absolutely delighted that it has rotated out and gone away. But the fact of the matter is, it literally broke the game. It was the best tag team for so long, and when you combine an absolutely broken GX attack with the sustained success it had for so long, it really is one of those cards where you might not like it, and I think I've been pretty clear that I don't, but I think you do have to put it in as number 1 as the best tag team Pokemon ever. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen, that's my list, but I'd love to hear your list. Do remember my rule: if you're going to put cards up, you've got to tell me what you're putting down. If you've got to put cards down, you've got to tell me which cards you're putting up. And if you want to give your own top 10 list, I would be delighted. Go nuts in the comment section, but be nice! And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWasi, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that good stuff, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. But by far the most important thing as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.